Good morning, everybody. Just arrived last night back from NATO, 2 days apart from my battle buddy, so it's good to see him this morning. Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
You too, sir.
Where there was a historic outcome. I want to start with that real quick. I think there's so much news, so many things happening that oftentimes big, momentous moments get missed. What President Trump accomplished in NATO yesterday was game-changing and historic. A shift in burden sharing to European responsibility in NATO that most would have said was impossible at the beginning of his term. But he said NATO needs to pay up. They started in the first term, and here in his second term, we've accelerated that. 32 NATO countries committed to spending 5% of their GDP on defense, on actually investing in the NATO alliance. So I hope with all the ink spilled, all of your outlets find the time to properly recognize this historic change in continental security that other presidents tried to do, other presidents talked about. President Trump accomplished it. It's a huge deal. You see, we're here this morning because in hunting for scandals all the time, in trying to find wedges and spin stories, this press corps and the press corps miss historic moments. You miss historic moments like 5% at NATO, which when you hear, I was in the closed door briefing. I wish there could have been cameras in there. When you heard the prime ministers and presidents of other countries, to a man and to a woman, looking at President Trump and saying, this never could have happened. Never would have happened. It seemed impossible 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 8 years ago. But here we are because of your leadership. If you ask them the question, I bet they'd say the same thing. But searching for scandals, you miss historic moments, like recruiting at the Pentagon. Historic levels in the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. Yeah, maybe there'll be a little mention here or there, but because it was under President Trump's leadership, because Americans are responding to him as commander-in-chief, the press corps doesn't want to write about it. Or bring us to the topic of the moment, the highly successful strikes in Iran. Let me read the bottom line here. President Trump directed the most complex and secretive military operation in history, and it was a resounding success, resulting in a ceasefire agreement and the end of the 12-day war. There's been a lot of discussion about what happened and what didn't happen. Step back for a second. Because of decisive military action, President Trump created the conditions to end the war, decimating, choose your word, obliterating, destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities. I want to read some of the assessments that have been provided, because whether it's fake news, CNN, MSNBC, or the New York Times, there's been fawning coverage of a preliminary assessment. I've had a chance to read it. Every outlet has breathlessly reported on a preliminary assessment from DIA. I'm looking at it right now. Again, it was preliminary, a day and a half after the actual strike, when it admits itself in writing that it requires weeks to accumulate the necessary data to make such an assessment. It's preliminary. It points out that it's not been coordinated with the intelligence community at all. There's low confidence in this particular report. It says in the report there are gaps in the information. It says in the report multiple linchpin assumptions are what this assessment, a linchpin assumption, you know what that is? That means your entire premise is predicated on a linchpin. If you're wrong, everything else is wrong. And yet, still, this report acknowledges it's likely severe damage. Again, this is preliminary, but leaked because someone had an agenda to try to muddy the waters and make it look like this historic strike wasn't successful. I'm going to get to the chairman in a moment because he's going to lay out the particulars for you based on his professional military experience. But here's what other folks are saying. The DIA that put that report out says this is a preliminary low-confidence report and will continue to be refined as additional intelligence becomes available. How about the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission? The devastating U.S. strikes on Fordow destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. Have any of these quotes made their way into the New York Times or the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN? Any of these quotes? How about this one? This is a new one from the UN, the United Nations. No friend of the United States, or certainly Israel often. Here's the head of the UN Atomic Energy Agency this morning. Rafael Grossi. U.S. and Israeli strikes caused enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Don't take my word for it. How about the IDF's chief of staff? I can say here that the assessment is that we significantly damaged the nuclear program, setting it back by years. I repeat, years. The Iranian foreign minister, the spokesman. Our nuclear installations have been badly damaged, that's for sure. I'm sure that's an understatement. John Radcliffe, the director of the CIA, putting out a statement just last night. CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable, very different than preliminary assessment with low confidence. He's saying historically reliable and accurate source and method that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years. CIA continues to collect additional reliably sourced information to keep appropriate decision makers fully informed. How about DNI Tulsi Gabbard yesterday? She writes, and I quote, "New intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed."
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, and all of you. Thank you for being here. As a follow-up to my comments on Sunday's press conference, I wanted to give you a few updates this morning on something I'm honored to do as a chairman, and that's a chance to get to talk about some of our service members and the incredible things that they do on behalf of our nation. And I apologize ahead of time for the length and the detail. Today I'm going to brief you on a couple things. First, I'm going to talk about our air defenders at Al Udeid in Qatar and their actions on Monday. Then I'm going to walk you through a little bit about the academics that went into the attack against Fordo, the massive ordnance penetrator weapon, and we're going to show a video that highlights the effects that weapon has. Of course, nobody was down inside the target, so we don't have video from the target. First, on Monday. As the President has stated, on Monday morning we began to receive indications and warnings that Iran intended to attack U.S. bases in the region. That morning, building on the work that CENTCOM Commander Eric Kurilla had done, and on the orders of the President, at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and around the region, we assumed a minimum force posture. Most folks had moved off the base to extend the security perimeter out away from what we assessed might be a target zone, except for a very few Army soldiers at Al Udeid. At that point, only 2 Patriot batteries remained on base, roughly 44 American soldiers responsible for defending the entire base, to include CENTCOM's forward headquarters in the Middle East, an entire air base, and all the U.S. forces there. The oldest soldier was a 28-year-old captain. The youngest was a 21-year-old private who'd been in the military for less than 2 years. So let's put ourselves out there for a second. Imagine you're that young first lieutenant, you're 25 or 26 years old, and you've been assigned as the tactical director inside the command and control element. You, at that age, are the sole person responsible to defend this base. Listening next to you is your early warning operator whose job is to notify you of imminent attack. There's 5 people inside a vehicle and 5 people outside of a vehicle around these, a total of, as I said, 44. By the way, you've sat in the Middle East for years, deployed over and over again, extended multiple times, always being prepared but unsure of when that particular day will come that you must execute your mission and not fail at doing it. In this case, these Patriot crews were deployed from Korea and Japan as part of our U.S. forces there to ensure that we had the most capable missiles in the CENTCOM area of responsibility. As the day continues, you start to hear more and more chatter in the information space about a pending attack. And as the sun starts to set in the west, you get orders from your higher headquarters to make sure that your missile batteries are pointed to the north. There are just a few other teammates. It's hot, you're getting nervous, and you expect an attack. Outside of those Patriot vehicles, your hot crew, which is 1 NCO and 4 additional soldiers, turns a key and relinquishes control of those missiles to that young lieutenant inside the vehicle, and you wait. You know that you're going to have approximately 2 minutes, 120 seconds to either succeed or fail. And then at approximately 12:30 p.m. on Monday, that's 7:30 p.m. in Qatar, as the sun sets in the west, Iran attacks. As the targets were detected, round after round of Patriot missiles are ejected from their canisters by an initial launch charge. Then the main solid rocket motor ignites. You can feel this in your body if you've ever been around a Patriot taking a shot. And round after round goes out and guides against those missiles coming inbound. We believe that this is the largest single Patriot engagement in U.S. military history. And we were joined in this engagement by the Qatari Patriot crews. I'm not going to tell you how many rounds were shot, but it was a bunch because of classified purposes. And we're aware that there's reports of something getting through. What we do know is there was a lot of metal flying around. Between attacking missiles being hit by Patriots, boosters from attacking missiles being hit by Patriots, the Patriots themselves flying around, and the debris from those Patriots hitting the ground, there was a lot of metal flying around. And yet our U.S. air defenders had only seconds to make complex decisions with strategic impact. These awesome humans, along with their Qatari brothers and sisters in arms, stood between a salvo of Iranian missiles and the safety of Al Udeid. They are the unsung heroes of the 21st century United States Army. And I know a lot of you have seen the videos online and the excitement as those Patriots departed their launchers and went up and guided. This really demonstrates the combat capability and capacity of our Army air defenders. Simply stated, they absolutely crushed it. If you'd flip this over, thanks. Let me next move to a walkthrough of the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapon and share a little bit about the planners who did this and their work on the weapon. First, let me set the stage for you. There's an organization in the U.S. called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. DTRA does a lot of things for our nation, but DTRA is the world's leading expert on deeply buried underground targets. In 2009, a Defense Threat Reduction Agency officer was brought into a vault at an undisclosed location and briefed on something going on in Iran. For security purposes, I'm not going to share his name. He was shown some photos and some highly classified intelligence of what looked like a major construction project in the mountains of Iran. He was tasked to study this facility, work with the intelligence community to understand it, and he was soon joined by an additional teammate. For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed this single target, Fordow, a critical element of Iran's covert nuclear weapons program. He studied the geology. He watched the Iranians dig it out. He watched the construction, the weather, the discard material, the geology, the construction materials, where the materials came from. He looked at the vent shaft, the exhaust shaft, the electrical systems, the environmental control systems, every nook, every crater, every piece of equipment going in and every piece of equipment going out. They literally dreamed about this target at night when they slept. They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. You do not build a multi-layered underground bunker complex with centrifuges and other equipment in a mountain for any peaceful purpose. They weren't able to discuss this with their family, their wives, their kids, their friends, but they just kept grinding it out. And along the way, they realized we did not have a weapon that could adequately strike and kill this target. So they began a journey to work with industry and other tacticians to develop the GBU-57. They tested it over and over again, tried different options, tried more after that. They accomplished hundreds of test shots and dropped many full-scale weapons against extremely realistic targets for a single purpose: kill this target at the time and place of our nation's choosing. And then, on a day in June of 2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered the B-2 force that you've supported to go strike and kill this target. Yesterday, I had the incredible honor and privilege of spending time with these two Defense Threat Reduction Agency officers who've given so much. One of them said, quote, "I can't even get my head around this. My heart is so filled with the pride of being a part of this team. I am so honored to be a part of this." To you both, thank you, and thank you to your families. Operation Midnight Hammer was the culmination of those 15 years of incredible work. The air crews, the tanker crews, the weapons crews that built the weapons, the load crews that loaded it. Before I run through this video today, I want to talk a little bit about weaponeering and what goes into an attack. Weaponeering is the science of evaluating a target. I mentioned all of those factors before that these two DTRA officers had thought about. Ultimately, weaponeering is determining the right weapon and fuse combination to achieve the desired effects and maximum destruction against a target. In the case of Fordo, the DTRA team understood with a high degree of confidence the elements of the target required to kill its functions, and the weapons were designed, planned, and delivered to ensure that they achieve the effects in the mission space. By the way, in the beginning of its development, we had so many PhDs working on the MOP program, doing modeling and simulation, that we were quietly and in a secret way the biggest users of supercomputer hours within the United States of America. So let me talk about the graphic a little bit. And the GBU-57, which all of you I know is a 30,000 pound weapon dropped only by the B-2. It's comprised of steel, explosive, and a fuse, programmed bespokely each weapon to achieve a particular effect inside the target. Each weapon had a unique desired impact angle, arrival, final heading, and a fuse setting. The fuse is effectively what tells the bomb when to function. A longer delay in a fuse, the deeper the weapon will penetrate and drive into the target. So on Fordo, in June of 2008, you can see these three holes. Depicted here is the main exhaust shaft with two additional ventilation shafts on either side. The United States decided to strike these two ventilation shafts, seen here on the main graphic, as the primary point of entry into the mission space. In the days preceding the attack against Fordo, the Iranians attempted to cover the shafts with concrete to try to prevent an attack. I won't share the specific dimensions of the concrete cap, but you should know that we know what the dimensions of those concrete caps were. The planners had to account for this. They accounted for everything. The cap was forcibly removed by the first weapon, and the main shaft was uncovered. Weapons 2, 3, 4, 5 were tasked to enter the main shaft, move down into the complex at greater than 1,000 feet per second, and explode in the mission space. Weapon number 6 was designed on each side, so there were 6 on each side. Weapons number 6 was designed as a flex weapon to allow us to cover if one of the preceding jets or one of the preceding weapons did not work. The video I'm about to show you is a culmination of over 15 years of development and testing. As I said, hundreds of test shots on various models. This is one weapon. So if you take a view of this as 5 additionals, you'll get a sense of what this looks like. Hopefully you can see it and there's not too much reflection. Tom runs our videos out there. We'll run it at full speed so you can see it and then go back through it. Go ahead, Tom. Keep it going for a minute. You'll see inside the mission space. Unlike a normal surface bomb, you won't see an impact crater because they're designed to deeply bury and then function. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. All 6 weapons at each vent at Fordo went exactly where they were intended to go. A bomb has three effects that causes damage: blast, fragmentation, and overpressure. In this case, the primary kill mechanism in the mission space was a mix of overpressure and blast ripping through the open tunnels and destroying critical hardware. The majority of the damage we assessed based on our extensive modeling was a blast layer combined with the impulse extending from the shock. Imagine what this looks like 6 times over. A point that I want to make here: the Joint Force does not do BDA.
Thank you, by the way, for that
By
extensive work.
design, we don't grade our own homework.
I mean, even do you have
the
that laser
intelligence community does. But here's what we know following the attacks and the strikes
I mean,
on
even
Fordo.
in just
First,
public reporting,
that the
you see
weapons
the
were built,
post-strike shafts of the
tested,
3
and
holes.
loaded properly.
The vast majority, and fairly
2,
so,
the
vast
weapons
majority of
were
speculation has
released
been
on
the 3,
speed and
strike
on
points.
parameters.
When in
3,
actuality,
the
what you
weapons all
realize is
guided
these are
to
the
their
vents,
intended
these are the
targets
caps,
and to their
the
intended
first
aim
munition
points.
took the cap off.
4,
and
the
other
weapons
5
functioned
went
as
down the
designed,
center
meaning
hole,
they
which,
exploded.
if
We
you're
know
planning
this
the target, you
through
would want it to be
other
the direct
means,
one going to the
intelligence
bottom.
means that we
These
have
are the types
that
of
were
things
visibly
that go into the planning for a strike.
we were visibly able to see them.
We
And we know that
Pentagon
the
would not
trailing
expect
jets saw the
press corps,
first
the American
weapons
people to
function,
initially
and the
understand,
pilot
so laying this
stated,
information
quote,
out
"This was the
is
brightest
helpful,
explosion
but it's also
that
why
I've ever
we
seen.
ask for
It
a beat
literally looked
for a
like
moment,
daylight."
for a day or two.
Let me now turn to the bomber
opportunity
crews themselves,
to tell that
give you a
story,
few
because
details
as the
about
chairman
them.
said, these men and
The
women
crews
that did
that
this
attacked
mission,
Fordo
they just want to
were
do their
from the
job.
active
They're not
duty Air
expecting their
Force
story to
and
be
the
told.
Missouri Air National
They're not
Guard.
expecting the
The
glory. They
crews
are grateful
ranked
for the flags
from
and hugs of
captain
family. That's
to
why
colonel,
they do the
and
job.
most were graduates of the Air
but
Force
they also
Weapons
know
School,
they were part of something
headquartered at
historic.
Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada.
We know how historic
I
it
will
was.
state
The
for the
chairman does.
record
I know
that
our
there
staffs
is no
know.
beach volleyball
And so that's why we are
or football at the
and
Air
the president
Force
of the United
Weapons
States
School.
knows.
There were
that's why,
male and
it's
female
almost
aviators
personal
on this mission.
when we see
and a
the
crew
way in
member
which
told me when I
leaks
talked
are
to
used
them
to
on
try to
video the other day
disparage
that this felt
the
like the
outcome
Super Bowl.
or muddy the waters
thousands
about
of
the
scientists,
impact of what
airmen, and
happened
maintainers
without
all
being
coming
responsible
together.
with information.
One last story
and allowing
about
the
people.
professionals to assess.
When
and
the
provide
crews
that
went to work
information
on
just like
Friday,
Chairman
they
did.
kissed their
So
loved
thank you,
ones
Mr. Chairman,
goodbye,
for that information.
not knowing
and
when
we welcome a few additional
or if
questions.
they'd be
Yes, sir.
home.
General,
Late on Saturday night,
Sunday
their
you
families
said-
became aware of what was happening. And on Sunday, when those jets returned from
would be
Whiteman,
way too
their
early
families were there. Flags flying
not
and
still
tears
be-
flowing. I have chills literally talking
So-
about this. The jets rejoined
what has
into a
changed?
formation of 4 airplanes
would you use
followed
the
by a
term
formation of
obliterated?
3 and came up overhead Whiteman, proudly in the traffic pattern, pitching out to land right over the
the best.
base and landing to the incredible cheers of their families who
I think I explained
sacrifice
what
and
changed.
serve right
there was a great
alongside
deal of
their family
irresponsible
members.
reporting
Like I said, there were a lot
based
of flags
on leaks,
and a lot of
preliminary
tears.
information in
One
low
commander
confidence.
told
Again,
me this
when someone
is
leaks something,
a moment in the lives
they
of
do
our
it with an
families
agenda.
that they will never
and
forget.
when you leak a
That,
portion
my
of an
friends,
intelligence
is
assessment,
what
but just a
America's
little
Joint Force
portion,
does. We
just a little
think,
portion that
we
makes it seem
develop,
like
we
maybe the
train,
strike
we
wasn't
rehearse,
effective,
we test,
then you
we
start
evaluate
a news cycle
every single
whether it's
day.
the Washington Post
And
or
when
Fox
the call
News or
comes to
CNN or
deliver,
MSNBC.
we do
You start a
so.
news cycle.
I could
that
not be
starts
more
to call into
proud
question
standing up here
the ethics
today of our
no,
Joint
that's
Force.
right.
I'm filled with
so
gratitude
you bring the
that
chairman
I get
here
to
who's
tell
not
their
involved in
story.
politics. He didn't do politics.
And as we
that's
stand
my
here
lane
right
to
now, our
understand and translate
forces
and talk about those
remain
types of
on a
things.
high
So I
state
can
of
use the word
readiness
obliterate
in
it.
the
He could
region,
use defeat,
prepared to
destroy,
defend
assess, all of
themselves.
those things. But
And
ultimately,
one
we're here to
last
clarify
thing.
what these weapons
Our
are capable of,
adversaries
which anyone
around the
with
world should know
two
that
eyes,
there are
some ears,
other
and a brain can
DTRA
recognize
team
that kind
members
of firepower
out there
with that
studying targets
specificity at that
for the same
location and
amount of
others
time.
is going to have a devastating
continue
effect.
to do
So
so.
we all
Thank you very
recognize
much.
there
I
will be
apologize
days and
for
weeks
the length.
ahead.
I look forward
That's
to
why
your
yesterday I
questions.
said, if you want to know what's going on at Fordo, you better go there and get a big shovel. Because no one's under there right now. No one's under there able to assess, and everyone's using
Yes, sir.
reflections of what they see. And that's why the Israelis, the Iranians, the IAEA, the UN, to a man and to a woman who recognize the capability of this weapon system are acknowledging how destructive it's been. So that's what's changed.
Just 3 or 4 days later.
What see, this is a point. This is how difficult it is to actually manage. You just watched a video of what this weapon is capable of. That's where we find our confidence, is in the skill of men and women and the capability of the systems they employed and the recognition so far in the reflections that it was a highly successful mission. Again, I go back to the IC, whether it's Director Radcliffe or ODNI Gabbard. I read the statements at the beginning. They're the ones aggregating the intelligence, and they're saying nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over a number of years. Facilities were destroyed. What do we got right here?
Sir, you cited a body of credible intelligence to suggest the damage at Fordo and other places. What is that referring to, and when can we see it?
I was reading from the CIA director's statement, which came out last night. CIA, again, they do the BDA, they do the assessment. CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates, it also goes on to say, new intelligence from historically reliable and accurate sources and methods. Now, you can imagine the CIA director is going to be very careful about how he articulates things of that
Final
sensitivity,
battle damage will take
classified,
some
secret,
time.
top secret,
And you also said, I
compartmentalized.
think,
He's going to
BDA
know
is still
things
pending.
that you're not going to know, that the press isn't going to know.
Me to
And
comment
he's
on
reflecting
what may or-
that the sources he's seeing
There.
are highly credible.
That was just over 3 days ago.
We need to see that?
Do you have a top secret clearance, sir?
Well,
Eventually,
Sure, like I
the
said, we
American
don't do
public wants
BDA. I'll refer that to the intelligence community. And
you're talking with them. I mean, what changed
Just
3 days to make
Check it, sure.
so, you know,
sir, I think
Sir.
Well, I can tell you what the chairman told me in the Situation Room and reminded us all, which is alongside what you just said, sir, is that the first reports are almost always wrong. They're almost always incomplete, right? Anything, whether it's a squad level operation or a strategic level operation, the initial reflections you get are coming at you at a high rate of speed from a lot of different sources. So your job is to step back and assess them, and that's why we're urging caution about premising entire stories on biased leaks to biased publications trying to make something look bad. How about we take a beat, recognize first the success of our warriors, hold them up, tell their stories, celebrate that, wave an American flag, be proud of what we accomplished. And in the meantime, I can assure you, the chairman and his staff, the intelligence community, our staff and others are doing all the assessments necessary to make sure that mission was indeed successful. Yes, right there.
So, Mr. Secretary, Iran has recognized that their nuclear program was indeed severely damaged, but they also said that only strengthened their ability in their nuclear program. How do you respond to that, sir? Is that a provocation?
Well, I would say Iran's going to have to say a lot of things right now in order to bolster their image, especially internally. You know, in
Sure, I think you
media,
could,
there's a lot of
I'd
things
say go
they'll
out.
say
The
for
IC
domestic
should be able to
consumption.
help you.
But we're
answer
watching
that
very
question.
closely what they do.
They look at a variety.
Again, that's the
as
intel
the
community.
Secretary's alluded
Our
to,
job,
look at a
as
variety
the chairman,
of
I mean,
things.
the chairman laid it up so beautifully.
I don't
Our job
do
is to
that.
be prepared.
They do. All,
And how proud
all
are you? How
different
proud am I?
sources of intel, which
I didn't know the full
refer you to
story
them
of
to-
those men
to
and women
get
15 years
clarity
ago who've been
on
pointing at that target.
So
That makes me proud to be an American. That's an awesome story. I hope we can tell more aspects of that in an unclassified way in the future. That's a great thing to know. Our job is to be prepared when the commander-in-chief calls based on those assessments. So, of course, our IC, the Intelligence Committee, will keep watching what Iran does and pay attention to that. But the president has created the contours, the opportunity for a deal, for peace, in something that the world said was intractable, that wasn't possible. And we got that peace, that ceasefire, that option, because of strength, because of his willingness to use American military might that no one else on the planet can do with the kind of planners and operators that the chairman just laid out. Yes, sir. Right there. Yep.
Me, sir? Just a quick question. There's public imagery available saying that highly enriched uranium was moved out of Fordo before the strikes. Is that accurate? Have you seen that? Sure. Chairman, a question for you. Have you been pressured to change your assessment or give a more rosy intelligence assessment to us by any political factors, whether it's the president or the secretary, and if you were?
Yes.
I wanted to ask briefly.
So Mike Glenn with the Washington Times.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir. Anybody who's ever read a Battalion S2 report after a fight knows that it's usually, the initial report is usually wrong, sometimes grossly so. Has what happened in this incident caused y'all to sort of rethink the intelligence process, if the process itself doesn't require any more adjustment?
There's nothing that I've seen that suggests that we didn't hit exactly what we wanted to hit in those locations.
That's not the question, though. It's about highly enriched uranium. Certainty that all the Fordo Mountain, or some of it, because there were satellite photos that showed a dozen trucks there to advance. Are you certain highly enriched?
Of course, we're watching every single aspect, but Jennifer, you've been about the worst, the one who misrepresents the most intentionally what the president says. I'm familiar.
About the ventilation shaft, and in fact, I was the first to do the B2, the refuel, great accuracy. So I take issue with that.
I appreciate you acknowledging that this was the first the most successful mission based on operational security that this department has done since you've been here, and I appreciate that. So we're looking at all aspects of intelligence and making sure we have a sense of what was
really
where.
damaged. The U.S. strikes
participated in the early
and their determination
messages
to
that you sent
complete.
out only congratulated the boys.
So when I say something like our
Iran?
boys and bombers, see, this is the kind of thing the press does, right? Of course, the chairman mentioned a female bomber pilot. That's fantastic. She's fantastic. She's a hero. I want more female bomber pilots. I hope the men and women of our country sign up to do such brave and audacious things. But when you spin it as, because I say our boys and bombers as a common phrase, I'll keep saying things like that, whether they're men or women. I'm very proud of that female pilot, just like I'm very proud of those male pilots. And I don't care if it's a male or a female in that cockpit, and the American people don't care. But it's the obsession with race and gender in this department that's changed priorities. We don't do that anymore. We don't play your little games. Yes, right there.
For the B-2 struck.
So I'm not aware of any intelligence that I've reviewed that says things were not where they were supposed to be, moved or otherwise. Yes.
For the service of these and everybody that serves. They will provide updated information for transparency. So, when it is ready, and people can understand.
Well, whatever. Actually, the report that was discussed, this preliminary report, was what's called a restrike report. So it comes to us to give us an assessment whether a target would need to be restruck. Right. That's the reason why. So it's based on internal feedback loop that we're supposed to have access to. Unfortunately, someone took advantage of that. But whatever is supposed to be made public will be. But whatever has to stay sensitive.
Would you do that?
Yeah, well, that one's easy. No, no, I have not, and no, I would not. My job as the chairman is to offer a range of options to the president and the National Command Authority to deliver the risks associated with each of those, and then take the orders of the National Command Authority and go execute them. I've never been pressured by the president or the secretary to do anything other than tell them exactly what I'm thinking.
So we're going to leave it right there. I want to
Exactly
thank
what I've
the heroism of our men and women in the military. What they accomplished is truly historic, setting back the Iranian nuclear program untold number of years. It was a devastating attack. We appreciate you covering it. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Do you have
Thank you.
all the highly enriched uranium was inside more than 2 days, and none of that rich uranium was moved. On Saturday night, described two bombers doing the entire mission with
Why not acknowledge the female pilots that also in this mission? uranium was removed from the facility before.
Kelly Meyer with News Nation, and just off the top, want to say we're great highlights. I wanted to ask you, the CIA statement said, when possible, it's an information to the public, and I believe that's what we're looking for here. Do you commit to share the Defense Intelligence Agency report so the American more about the intelligence assessment?
Sir, can I just jump in? You know, one of the things that I'm trying to do through this journey that we're on together, of course, transparency, but also the requirement to really protect these capabilities. I guess the time's up. So there's a balance in there, right? We do need to preserve options should the nation and the joint force be tasked to go do something again. So I'm confident we'll find the middle ground, but there are some things that if asked, I'd want to not release.
Sir.